At our family barbecue, when I refused to hand over my savings to my brother, my parents snarled, "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." My brother smirked while I simply raised my drink and said, "Challenge accepted." That night, I moved out, cut all contact, and vanished. A year later, they called me in tears. Who's forgotten now? My name is Michael Quinn, but for most of my life, I've just been Mikey. At 28, I was a mechanical engineer, a fixer of things, both tangible and intangible. I carried the weight of my family's expectations like a second skin, one I'd worn so long that I barely noticed its irritation or the way it was slowly suffocating me. My deepest desire wasn't for success in my career, though I worked hard for it. No, what I truly longed for, an ache that settled deep in my bones, was a simple nod of recognition from my own parents, a flicker of genuine appreciation for the sacrifices I'd made. Those sacrifices were many. I had put my master's degree on indefinite hold, the acceptance letter yellowing in a desk drawer because Mom and Dad needed help with the mortgage on the family home, the same home where I still lived. My childhood bedroom was a testament to my arrested development. A hefty bonus I'd received 2 years ago, money I'd mentally earmarked for a down payment on a small condo of my own, a first step toward independence, had instead vanished into the black hole of my younger brother Ben's gambling debts. Mom had cried. Dad had looked disappointed in me for even hesitating, and Ben had just looked bored, as if it were all an inconvenience he'd rather not deal with. The incident was then swept under the rug, another family secret festering in the dark. My toolbox was a familiar sight in every room of that house. Leaky faucets, a sputtering furnace in the dead of winter, the temperamental garage door opener. I was the on-call, unpaid handyman. I'd spent countless weekends patching drywall Ben had dented in a fit of rage or rewiring a light fixture Mom had shorted out. These small acts, these constant repairs, saved them thousands over the years, but they were as invisible as the air they breathed. Just Mikey doing what Mikey does. Recently, the pressure had intensified. A fantastic job opportunity had come my way, a significant promotion, a chance to lead a small team, but it was in a city 3 states over. My heart had leapt. This was it. My chance. But when I broached the subject, Mom's eyes welled up. "Oh, Mikey, but who will look after things here? Your father's not getting any younger, and Ben, well, you know Ben." Dad had just sighed that familiar sigh, the one that always made my stomach clench. "We need you here, son." And so, the dream had withered, another casualty laid at the altar of family obligation. My parents, Mr. and Mrs. Quinn, weren't bad people. Not in the way that villains in movies are bad. They were just consumed by appearances, by what the neighbors thought, by a desperate need to project an image of comfortable success. And at the center of that projected image was Ben. Ben, 2 years my junior, was their golden boy. He was charming when he wanted to be, with an easy smile that could melt glaciers, or so Mom always said. But beneath that veneer, he was lazy, entitled, and possessed a talent for financial irresponsibility that bordered on genius. He lived for the dopamine hit of social media likes, constantly flaunting new gadgets or experiences he hadn't earned, a stark contrast to my quiet, diligent existence. It wasn't just that they favored Ben, it was that they actively used my resources to fuel his lifestyle. Last Christmas, Ben had decided he needed the latest gaming console, the one that cost nearly $1,000. I'd overheard him complaining to Mom about how stingy I was and how I had all this money for my fancy job. A week later, Mom approached me, her expression a careful blend of maternal concern and subtle coercion. "Mikey dear, Ben's been so down lately. That console would really lift his spirits. You wouldn't want your brother to be unhappy, would you?" The implication was clear. My savings, my hard work, were merely a communal pot for Ben to dip into whenever he pleased. I bought the console. Ben had played it for a week before it started gathering dust. These weren't isolated incidents. They were a pattern, a tapestry woven from threads of guilt, obligation, and manipulation. After a particularly egregious episode where Ben had borrowed my car without asking, run 3 red lights, according to the tickets that arrived in my name, and returned it with a new dent and an empty gas tank, I felt something shift within me. Mom had actually said, "Oh, boys will be boys, Mikey." At least he didn't get hurt. The sheer injustice of it, the casual dismissal of my property and my feelings, had been a cold slap. That night, unable to sleep, the hum of the old refrigerator a counterpoint to the turmoil in my chest, I found myself on my laptop. I typed "separating finances from family" into the search bar, then opened a Soul Bank account. The information had been a revelation, a lifeline. The following payday, I quietly opened a new account at a different bank, an account only in my name. I set up a new direct deposit for my salary. It was a small secret act of rebellion, a tiny seed of self-preservation planted in barren soil. I even started idly browsing apartment listings in Oak Haven, the city where that job offer had been, just to know, just in case. The annual Quinn family Memorial Day barbecue was a tradition I usually dreaded. It was a command performance of familial harmony, a pageant where everyone played their assigned roles. Dad would man the grill with performative gusto, Mom would fuss over the potato salad, and Ben would hold court, regaling a captive audience of aunts, uncles, and cousins with exaggerated tales of his non-existent accomplishments. I was usually relegated to a supporting role, assistant grill master, drink fetcher, the one who made sure the citronella candles stayed lit. But this year, as the day approached, my usual sense of resignation was overlaid with a strange, thrumming anxiety. The air in the house felt thicker, charged with unspoken tensions. Perhaps it was the lingering sting of that lost job opportunity or the growing weight of Ben's escalating demands. He'd been dropping increasingly subtle hints about needing a new car, something flashy to match his personal brand, as he called it. My stomach churned at the thought. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the core where my parents would expect the money for that car to come from. I just hoped, with a naive belief I should have outgrown years ago, that for once, just once, they'd surprise me. That this barbecue would be different. It was a late May sun, beating down with an almost aggressive cheerfulness, a stark contrast to the knot tightening in my gut. The air was thick with the scent of sizzling beef patties and charcoal, a smell that usually brought a nostalgic comfort, but today just felt cloying. Classic rock, Ben's choice, naturally, blared from a Bluetooth speaker a little too loudly, making normal conversation a strained effort. I was stationed by the grill, flipping burgers, the heat prickling my face, while Dad was off supervising, which mostly meant holding a beer and pontificating to Uncle Joe about the merits of his new lawn mower. Ben, meanwhile, was in his element, sporting a ridiculously oversized watch, the kind that screamed, "Look at me!" and animatedly describing to a group of younger cousins some vague high-flying business venture he was supposedly on the cusp of launching. His voice, even above the music, carried an oily self-assurance that made my teeth ache. I saw Mom watching him, her face alight with a pride that was almost painful for me to witness. For me, she usually reserved a look of mild, perpetual worry, as if I were a problem she hadn't quite figured out how to solve. The demand, when it came, wasn't a surprise. It was the execution that twisted the knife. Mom and Dad cornered me near the drinks table, partially shielded by a large overgrown azalea bush but not entirely out of earshot of anyone nearby. Ben, sensing an opportunity, detached himself from his fan club and sauntered over, leaning against the fence with a proprietary air like a prince observing his courtiers. "Mikey, honey," Mom began, her voice syrupy sweet, the kind she used when she was about to ask for something significant. "Your father and I have been talking about Ben." Dad cleared his throat, taking over. "Son, Ben's got a real shot at something big with this new internet thing he's doing." I suppressed a snort. Ben's internet thing usually involved losing money on cryptocurrency fads or trying to become a gaming influencer. But he needs to look the part, you know? Project success. He needs a decent car. A reliable car is important, I conceded carefully, my hand tightening around the cool plastic cup in my hand. I could help him research some good used options. Maybe something fuel-efficient. Mom waved a dismissive hand, her smile faltering. "Oh, Mikey, don't be like that. He needs something impressive, something that says he's arrived." Her eyes flicked toward the gleaming new SUV Uncle Joe had proudly driven up in. "We were thinking," Dad continued, his gaze unwavering, "that you could help him with the down payment. $15,000 should do it for that red convertible he's had his eye on." $15,000. It was almost the entirety of what I'd painstakingly saved in my new secret bank account. My escape fund, my fresh start money, the money I'd mentally allocated for a deposit on an apartment in Oak Haven, for the professional certification course that could elevate my career. The audacity of it, the casual assumption that my future was theirs to allocate, stole my breath. "I can't do that," I said, my voice quieter than I intended but firm. "That money is for my own plans, for my future." The shift in their demeanor was instantaneous. Mom's smile vanished, replaced by a pinched, affronted look. "Your future," she repeated, her voice rising. "What about your brother's future? Don't you care about him at all? After everything we've done for you, living in our house rent-free all these years." Rent-free? As if my constant repairs, my contributions to the mortgage, my forfeited dreams counted for nothing. "It's not about not caring," I tried to explain, my chest tightening as if someone had wrapped barbed wire around my lungs. "It's about what's reasonable. A $15,000 down payment on a sports car for someone with no steady income isn't reasonable." My Aunt Carol, Mom's younger sister, had wandered closer to refill her iced tea. I saw her pause, her expression unreadable, as Mom's voice escalated. A few other relatives, Uncle Joe included, glanced over, their conversations faltering, their eyes sliding away when they met mine, a collective refusal to get involved, a silent endorsement of my parents' dominion. I felt a profound sense of isolation, as if I were standing on a shrinking island with the tide rushing in. Dad stepped forward, his face flushed. "Don't you take that tone with your mother, Michael. We're your parents. We know what's best, and what's best is that Ben gets this chance. He deserves it. Deserves it." I couldn't help the incredulous laugh that escaped me. It was a harsh, bitter sound. "What exactly has he done to deserve a sports car I pay for?" That's when Mom delivered the line. Her voice, no longer syrupy, was cold, laced with a contempt that cut deeper than any physical blow. She spoke loudly, clearly, each word a precisely aimed dart. "Honestly, Michael, you're being so incredibly selfish. You're always thinking about yourself. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." The words hung in the suddenly still air. The music seemed to fade, the chirping of crickets amplifying in the silence. Uncle Joe abruptly found something fascinating about the pattern on his paper plate. Aunt Carol winced, a flicker of something, pity? Discomfort? in her eyes before she too looked away. Dad nodded, his jaw set in grim agreement. "Your mother's right. You contribute nothing of real value beyond money when we ask for it, and now you won't even do that." "And Ben?" My brother just smirked. A slow, triumphant grin spread across his face as he pushed himself off the fence. "Yeah, bro," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Lighten up. It's just money. You can always make more." In that instant, something inside me didn't just break. It vaporized. The years of hurt, of resentment, of quiet desperation coalesced into a single chilling point of clarity. I looked at them. My mother, her face a mask of righteous indignation. My father, stern and unyielding. My brother, gloating in his perceived victory. They weren't family. Not in any way that mattered. They were users, emotional vampires who had bled me dry and were now indignant that there was nothing left to take. The barbed wire around my lungs loosened, then vanished. A strange, cold calm settled over me. I straightened up, meeting their gazes without flinching. I lifted my plastic cup, the ice cubes clinking softly. "Challenge accepted," I said. My voice was even, devoid of tremor, devoid of any discernible emotion. It was the voice of a stranger. Mom and Dad stared, momentarily stunned into silence by my uncharacteristic response. Ben's smirk wavered, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Then Mom scoffed, a dismissive wave of her hand. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, Michael." Dad grunted, turning back toward the grill as if the matter was settled, as if I'd just thrown a childish tantrum. I didn't say another word. I set my cup down on the picnic table, the plastic making a small, definitive click. "I think I've got a bit of a headache," I murmured to no one in particular. "I'm going to go lie down for a bit." No one tried to stop me. No one asked if I was okay. As I walked toward the house, I could hear Mom already launching into a complaint about my attitude to Aunt Carol, her voice regaining its aggrieved tone. Ben was laughing again. That night, while the house slept, filled with the lingering scent of charcoal and the faint rhythmic snores of my father, I moved with quiet efficiency. My duffel bag, really an old gym bag, was already half-packed from weeks of idle what-if scenarios. I added a few more clothes, my laptop, and the small fireproof safe containing my important documents. Birth certificate, social security card, the paperwork for my new bank account. I took my personal toolkit, the good one, the one Dad always borrowed and never returned. I left behind the photo of myself with my parents, the one from my college graduation, face down on my neatly made bed. My car keys were in my pocket. My new SIM card, purchased weeks ago, was ready. The emergency cash I'd stashed, a few hundred, painstakingly saved from overtime and lunch money, was in my wallet. I walked through the silent kitchen. On the counter, by the coffee maker, lay my house key. I picked it up, the metal cool against my palm. For a moment I hesitated, then with a steady hand, I placed it on the polished granite next to the sugar bowl, a small silver declaration of independence. The click of the front door latch sounded unnaturally loud in the stillness. As I drove away from the house I'd grown up in, the house that had become a gilded cage, I didn't look back. The streetlights cast long, lonely shadows. I drove to a cheap, anonymous motel on the outskirts of a neighboring town, the one I'd idly looked up online. The room smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and industrial cleaner. It was perfect. I pulled out my burner phone, the one with the new SIM, and sent one text message to Sarah, my oldest friend, the only one who knew the full extent of the dysfunction I called family. "Did it? Talk soon," her reply came almost instantly. "Proud of you. Call when you can. Safe travels." No grand announcement to my family, no angry letter detailing my grievances. Just silence, the most profound and telling response to their assertion that my absence would go unnoticed. I was about to put that theory to the test. The first few weeks were a blur of logistics and adrenaline. Oak Haven was a good 5-hour drive, a city large enough to get lost in, to reinvent myself. The apartment I found was small, a one-bedroom in a slightly run-down but clean building, smelling of fresh paint and the faint hopeful aroma of someone else's curry from down the hall. It was mine. Every mismatched piece of second-hand furniture I slowly acquired, every cheap print I hung on the wall was a testament to my newfound freedom. I landed a job within 3 weeks. My skills as a mechanical engineer were in demand, and the company, a mid-sized firm specializing in sustainable energy solutions, felt like a breath of fresh air. My colleagues were professional, respectful. No one asked me to fix the office coffee maker or expected me to fund their personal projects. It was normal, disconcertingly, wonderfully normal. The silence from my family was initially deafening in its own way. For the first few days after the barbecue, I imagined they probably assumed I was sulking in my room or had gone to stay with Sarah. I'd left my old phone, the one tied to their family plan, on the nightstand in my motel room, wiped clean. Let them find it or not. I didn't care. The first text to my new anonymous number started about a week after I left. They must have gotten it from Sarah, though I knew she'd only have given it up under duress. Probably after a barrage of frantic calls from Mom. "Mikey, where are you? This isn't funny anymore. Your father needs help fixing the gutter." "Mom. Michael, your mother is worried sick. Call us now." "Dad. Yo bro, you still mad? Dad's legit pissed about that gutter." Then I read them with a strange detachment, then blocked each number as it came in. I deactivated the vestigial social media accounts I'd barely used but knew they'd try to troll my online presence. I became a ghost. Sarah was my lifeline. We spoke every few days. "They're going ballistic," she told me during one call, her voice a mix of concern and grim satisfaction. "Your mom called me crying, then your dad got on the phone and practically yelled at me, demanding to know where you were. Ben even tried to sweet-talk me. It was pathetic." "Thanks for not caving," I said, the gratitude raw in my voice. The small, bare living room of my apartment felt like a sanctuary. "Are you kidding? After everything they've put you through?" "Team Mikey all the way," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I started therapy, online sessions at first, with a therapist Sarah recommended. Dr. Evans was a calm, insightful woman who helped me unpack years of emotional baggage, the carefully constructed narratives of duty and obligation that had kept me tethered to a toxic dynamic. "You're grieving, Michael," she said one afternoon as sunlight streamed through my small window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. "Grieving the family you wished you had, not necessarily the one you left." Her words resonated deeply. It was a slow, painful process, like lancing a wound that had festered for years. But with each session, I felt a little lighter, a little more whole. I was learning to set boundaries, to value my own needs, to understand that no was a complete sentence. Months drifted by, turning into a season, then 2. I settled into a routine, work, therapy, exploring Oak Haven on weekends. I joined a local makerspace, a communal workshop filled with inventors and hobbyists. The smell of sawdust, hot metal, and ozone from the 3D printers was invigorating. I started sketching designs for a small innovative hydraulic pump I'd been conceptualizing for years, a project I'd never had the mental energy or resources to pursue before. Then came the first concrete sign that my absence was indeed being noticed, and not in the way they'd ever anticipated. It was about 4 months after I'd left. A major storm had ripped through my old hometown, and a large tree in their backyard had come crashing down, narrowly missing the house but taking out a section of the fence and damaging the roof of the garage. It was exactly the kind of expensive, labor-intensive mess I would have been expected to manage and largely pay for. A frantic voicemail appeared on my burner phone from a number I didn't recognize, but which Sarah later confirmed belonged to a cousin. Mom's voice was shrill with panic. "Michael, you need to come home. There's been a terrible accident with a tree. The insurance won't cover all of it. We need you." I didn't call back. A few weeks after that, the real shockwave must have hit them. Ben, true to form, had apparently gotten himself into some minor legal trouble. Unpaid parking tickets escalating to a suspended license or something equally idiotic. To cover his fines and a lawyer, Mom and Dad had apparently tried to draw on a home equity line of credit they'd taken out years ago. A line I had, under duress, co-signed, or so they thought. What they didn't know was that after the incident with Ben's gambling debts, I had consulted a free legal aid service online. On their advice, I had formally requested my name be removed as a co-signer, citing my lack of direct benefit and Ben's proven financial instability. It had been a complicated process requiring me to demonstrate I was no longer contributing to that household's expenses, which by then was true. The bank, after much paperwork, had eventually complied. I'd received the confirmation letter just a month before the barbecue. I could only imagine their faces at the bank when the loan officer informed them that the line of credit was significantly smaller than they remembered, and that my name and my income were no longer attached to it. The subsequent flurry of calls from unknown numbers, each one blocked, told its own story. Their safety net, the one they'd woven from my earnings and my sense of obligation, had vanished. Aunt Carol, Mom's younger sister, the one who had looked uncomfortable at the barbecue, managed to find my new work email address. Her message was cautious, carefully neutral. "Michael, I hope this email finds you well. Things are difficult here. Your parents are struggling financially and emotionally. They talk a lot about how you've abandoned them. Ben is being more of a handful than usual. I'm not taking sides, but I just wanted you to know, and to say I always thought you were a good lad." Carol's email was a small crack of light in the wall of silence I'd erected. It confirmed my suspicions. They weren't just missing my money. They were missing the person who absorbed their chaos, the buffer against the consequences of their own poor decisions and Ben's reckless behavior. They were finally experiencing the full weight of their choices, unfiltered by my presence. I didn't reply to Aunt Carol immediately. I needed to process it. There was no triumph, no vindictive pleasure, just a quiet, somber acknowledgement of a truth I'd always known but had never dared to fully confront. I had been the load-bearing pillar in a house that was structurally unsound, and now that the pillar was gone, the cracks were beginning to show. My life in Oak Haven, however, was starting to feel solid. I was making friends at the makerspace. My hydraulic pump design was taking shape. I was even tentatively considering going on a date with a woman from my yoga class, a class Dr. Evans had suggested for stress relief. The scar of my past was still there, a faint, tender outline, but it no longer ached with every breath. I was healing. I was building. I was, for the first time in my adult life, truly Michael. Not Mikey the fixer, not Mikey the ATM, but Michael the architect of his own life. The call came on a crisp Saturday morning in late autumn, almost exactly a year after I'd walked away from the barbecue that had become my personal Rubicon. I was at my small kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee, the Oak Haven Gazette spread open before me, sunlight warming my face. The burner phone, usually silent, vibrated against the cheap laminate with an insistent buzz. An unknown number. My first instinct was to ignore it, to block it like all the others. But something, a premonition perhaps, made me hesitate. I let it ring a third time, then answered. "Hello." A choked sob, then a voice I knew as well as my own, yet distorted by a raw, unfiltered agony I'd never heard before. "Michael." "Oh, Michael, thank God. It's Mom." Her voice was a torrent of frantic, disjointed words. "It's Ben." "Oh, Mikey, it's your brother. He was in an accident. A terrible, terrible accident. I listened, my own blood turning to ice despite the morning sun. My coffee cup grew heavy in my hand. She painted a picture of recklessness and disaster. Ben had finally acquired his flashy sports car, not the red convertible but something equally ostentatious and expensive, likely financed through some predatory lender after my refusal to fund it. He'd been street racing, showing off to some new, equally idiotic friends. He'd lost control. He's mostly okay, Mom blubbered. A broken arm, some bruises. But the car, Michael. The car is totaled. And he hit someone else. They're in the hospital. There are lawyers. The police. They're talking about enormous sums of money, Michael. We could lose the house. We'll lose everything. Her voice cracked on everything. A moment later, the call from my father. You're the only one who can help us. You're the only one who can help. The old script, the familiar refrain, you have to help, you're the only one. But this time, the words washed over me, leaving no residue of guilt, no familiar tug of obligation. There was only a vast echoing emptiness where those feelings used to reside. Mom, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, calm. Where are Dad and Ben now? Your father is at the police station with Ben. I couldn't bear it, Michael. Please. And then a line that almost made me laugh. If the situation hadn't been so dire. If you were here, this never would have happened. You always knew how to keep Ben in line. The sheer breathtaking audacity of her attempt to shift the blame, even now, was astounding. I see, I said. I need some time to think. I will call you back on this number in exactly 1 hour. Have Dad and Ben there? All three of you need to be on the call. But Michael. 1 hour. I disconnected the call, my hand surprisingly steady. The sun still streamed through the window, but the warmth had leached from the day. For that hour, I didn't pace. I didn't agonize. I sat at my table, sipping my now tepid coffee, and I thought. I thought about the years of being their emotional and financial dumping ground. I thought about the sneer on Ben's face, the cold dismissal in my parents' eyes at that barbecue. I thought about the quiet dignity of my small apartment, the fulfilling work I was doing, the new friendships, the rediscovered sense of self. Dr. Evans' words came back to me. You cannot set yourself on fire to keep others warm. When I called back using a conference call app so I could remain anonymous if I chose, they answered on the first ring. Mom's sniffles were audible. Dad's gruff hello was tight with a tension that vibrated through the phone line. Ben was silent. I'm listening, I said. They launched into it, a 3-part chorus of desperation, excuses, and thinly veiled demands. Mom pleaded. Dad blustered about family duty, his voice cracking with an uncharacteristic fear. Ben, when prodded by Dad, mumbled a half-hearted, "Yeah, Mikey, I really messed up. Sorry." It was the sorriest excuse for an apology I'd ever heard. When they finally wound down, a heavy silence filled the digital space between us. Are you finished? I asked, my voice still calm, almost unnervingly so. Michael, son, Dad began, his voice shaking. What are you going to do? We need. Let me tell you what I'm going to do, I interrupted. For the first time, a sliver of the ice I'd held within me for a year began to creep into my tone. I'm going to remind you of a conversation we had about a year ago at a family barbecue. You, Mom, told me that if I disappeared, no one would even notice. You, Dad, agreed and said I contributed nothing of real value. And you, Ben, just smirked. Another silence, thicker this time, charged with their dawning comprehension. Well, I continued, it seems you were wrong. You did notice when the handyman wasn't there to fix the damage from the storm. You did notice when the co-signer for your line of credit had vanished. And you certainly seem to be noticing now that the family ATM is no longer in service to bail Ben out of the catastrophic mess he created. A mess you both enabled for his entire life. Michael, that's not fair. Mom cried. We didn't mean it like that. It doesn't matter how you meant it, I said, my voice hardening. It's what you said. It's what you showed me over and over again. And just so we're clear, Mom, about what you said on the phone earlier, about this never happening if I were there, you're probably right. Because if I were still there, still enmeshed in your dysfunction, Ben probably wouldn't have had the nerve or the resources to buy that car in the first place because my resources would have already been depleted, bailing him out of a dozen smaller messes you'd have swept under the rug. Now listen to me carefully, I went on, the words coming out clear and precise, like shards of glass. You are right about one thing. Ben is your son, and he is your brother. But he is your responsibility. His actions have consequences. And for the first time in his adult life, and yours, all of you are going to have to face them without me as your shield or your scapegoat. But the house, Dad choked out. We could lose the house. That is a consequence of your collective choices, I stated. Perhaps if you hadn't poured so much money into enabling Ben's lifestyle, you'd have more of a cushion now. Then Ben finally spoke, his voice a sullen whine. So you're just going to let us drown? Some family you are. I repeated, family. And this time I did laugh. A short, sharp, humorless sound. You want to talk about family, Ben? After everything? And just so there are no misunderstandings, no attempts to twist my words later or claim you didn't understand the situation clearly. I paused for effect. I have an audio recording of our entire conversation at that barbecue. All the words Mom said, all the words Dad said, your charming little contributions, Ben. It's all there, crystal clear. The silence that followed was absolute. I could almost hear their minds racing, the implications of that recording sinking in. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had been annihilated. I will not be giving you any money, I said finally, my voice softening slightly. Not with pity, but with the weariness of a battle finally won. I will not be co-signing any loans. I will not be intervening in any way. Ben will have to face the legal system. You will have to manage your finances. This is your reality now. I could hear Mom openly weeping. Dad was making a strange, strangled noise. I will offer you one piece of advice, I said. There are non-profit credit counseling services. There are public defenders. These are resources available to people in your situation. I suggest you use them. And then I delivered my final boundary. Do not contact me again regarding this. In fact, do not contact me again unless it is to inform me of a dire medical emergency for one of you. And it had better be truly dire. Otherwise, consider this my final word on the matter. I ended the call. My hands were trembling slightly, my heart was pounding, but beneath the adrenaline, there was a profound, unshakable sense of peace. The chains had finally, definitively broken. In the months that followed, scraps of news reached me, mostly through Aunt Carol, with whom I eventually started exchanging polite, infrequent emails, and occasionally through Sarah, whose mother still lived in my old hometown and heard the local gossip. My parents had to sell the house, the one filled with so many hollow memories. They moved into a small rented apartment on the other side of town. Ben, through some plea bargain, avoided jail time but ended up with a hefty fine, a long probation, mandatory community service, and a suspended sentence hanging over his head. He was forced to get a menial minimum wage job to start paying off his debts. The flashy lifestyle was over. Reality had bitten hard. I didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction in their downfall, only a quiet affirmation that actions have consequences and that my self-preservation had been necessary and right. On the advice of Dr. Evans, and to ensure my peace was permanent, I had a lawyer draft a formal letter reiterating my boundaries regarding contact. It felt like closing the final door, locking it securely. My life in Oak Haven continued to blossom. The hydraulic pump design won a small local innovation grant. I was dating Cassandra, the woman from yoga class, and it was nice, easy, healthy. My chosen family, Sarah, my friends from the makerspace, even Aunt Carol in her own way, provided a sense of belonging I'd never found in the house I grew up in. The scar of my past would always be a part of me, a reminder of where I'd come from, but it no longer defined me. I was no longer Mikey the forgotten son, the invisible pillar. I was Michael Quinn, a man who had faced down his past, reclaimed his worth, and had, against all odds, found his way to a quiet, sunlit peace. I had accepted their challenge, and in doing so, I had won myself. Sometimes, late at night, when the city hummed its steady lullaby outside my window, I'd think about them. I'd wonder if they ever truly understood the profound irony of their words that day at the barbecue. They'd said no one would notice if I disappeared, but my disappearance was the one thing that had finally forced them to see. It took walking away for me to find my worth, and for them to finally see it, albeit too late. Have you ever felt like no one notices you in your own home or had to make a really hard decision just to keep your mind calm? Tell us what happened in the comments. Sometimes, just knowing others feel the same way can help you start to take control of your life again.